The grand hall of concordance was silent, save for the slow, rhythmic thrum of anti-gravity engines humming beneath the marble floor. 1,000 alien races sat in tiered rows, luminescent eyes and bioluminescent scales casting kaleidoscopic reflections on the crystalline ceiling. The universe was watching, and the universe was confused, because the human ambassador was bleeding. Ambassador Adrian Holt stood defiant, blood trailing from a wound on his side that shimmered red against the sterile white of his diplomatic robes. His voice, though weakened, echoed through the hall's amplified acoustics like a thunderclap. "You call this peace," he spat, gesturing around the chamber. "But I have seen your black sites. I've seen the erased colonies. I've seen the cost." Gasps, hisses, and ultrasonic shrieks erupted from the audience. The Kthari delegation recoiled with their mandibles clicking in alarm. The Vayari's gelatinous body pulsed a violent crimson, an alien sign of fury. But Holt didn't flinch. He stared up at the 12-member High Consulate, seated on thrones floating above the center dais, each one representing a founding race of the Galactic Concord. "You accuse us of aggression," one of the consuls intoned coldly. It was Consul Vurix of the Sailnari, an avian race known for their serene demeanor and brutal hypocrisy. "Yet here you stand, wounded, armed, threatening our collective unity." Holt's lip curled. "I didn't come here to threaten you. I came to expose you." A sharp movement. The thin slit of a concealed blaster turret blinked into view beneath one of the floating thrones. Not for the audience to see, but Holt had known where to look. "I uploaded the data to a quantum transmitter before I left Earth," Holt said, addressing not the consuls now, but the silent, watching audience. "It's out there. Proof of the exterminated systems, of your engineered wars, of the peacekeepers that never returned. You erased civilizations, millions, and blamed it on chaos." A beat of silence. Then Consul Varix's feathers rippled with irritation. "Lies." "No," came a new voice, deep, resonant, and entirely unexpected. From the lower tier, a Qatari warrior stood. Their kind rarely spoke at Concord assemblies. Even more rarely did they disobey the consulate. General Rokan of the Qatari tilted his broad, scale-armored head. "We served your peace. We enforced your will. But the humans were the only ones who treated us as equals. When their colonies vanished, they didn't accuse. They searched. Quietly. Thoroughly." He turned, facing the chamber. And what they found was horror. More murmurs now. Dissension. Holt swayed. Blood loss was taking its toll. But he stood straighter, fueled by purpose. "This isn't about humanity against the galaxy. This is about truth. About justice. And you," he glared up at Vurix, "you've controlled the narrative long enough." Then, from somewhere deep in the chamber, a scream, cut short. Chaos bloomed like a virus. Dozens of hooded security figures rushed into the hall, but they weren't the Concord's usual guards. Their armor bore no insignia, and their weapons were raised not to protect, but to silence. Holt barely dodged the first shot. A sizzling beam of energy seared past his shoulder, vaporizing a chunk of the dais behind him. He dove, rolled, and hit the emergency override on his forearm band. Earth would receive the message. The lights flickered. The hall descended into panic. Delegates scattered, some teleporting out, others drawing concealed weapons. The myth of peace was collapsing under its own weight, and the first crack had been a human's voice. Adrian Holt, still bleeding, still standing, turned and sprinted toward the exit. He didn't know if he'd survive the hour, but he knew this much. Humanity had learned to speak softly in a galaxy ruled by fear. Now, it was time to let the truth roar. Adrian Holt's breath was ragged as he stumbled down the narrow corridor of the Concord Central Complex, pain throbbing in his side with every step. He didn't dare glance back. He didn't need to. The chaos behind him was unmistakable. The screams, the explosions, the sound of doors being smashed open, those were the consequences of a simple truth. The doors to the shuttle bay slid open with a hiss as he burst through, his legs nearly giving way beneath him. But his eyes, sharp with desperation, immediately locked onto the small ship waiting for him. the Resolute. It was a compact diplomatic transport, designed for covert extractions. It had been waiting for moments like this, moments when diplomacy failed. "Hurry, Ambassador," a voice called from inside the ship. Lieutenant Mara Radley, his pilot, already had the engines roaring to life. Adrian didn't need to be told twice. He staggered inside, barely managing to strap himself into the seat before Mara gunned the engines, the ship rising smoothly from the ground. Through the viewport, the sprawling city of Concordia, the capital of the galactic Concord, blurred into a sea of lights and shadow. "Did you send a message?" Mara asked, eyes never leaving the console. "Before I left the hall," Adrian replied through gritted teeth, his hand clutching the bleeding wound in his side. "It's in the hands of Earth's command. They know everything." "Do you think they'll believe it?" she asked, her tone uncharacteristically uncertain. Adrian didn't answer at first. He was still trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. They were in the air now, the atmosphere of the giant space station slipping away as they surged toward the outer reaches of the system. For the first time, humanity had kicked down the door of the galactic Concord and exposed its ugly truth. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The Concord had been the beacon of peace for centuries, a symbol of unity for all races in the galaxy. But the moment Holt had entered the hall, the lies had crumbled. The peace was a carefully constructed illusion, maintained at the cost of countless civilizations. Entire species had been eradicated in secret, labeled as failures in the grand experiment of unity. The humans had learned too much, too quickly, and now they were the only ones with the courage to speak out. "I don't care if they believe it or not," Adrian finally said, his voice steadier than he felt. "The truth is out there now. Even if Earth's command only listens to half of it, they'll know we didn't stand by while the galaxy burned. They'll know humanity fought for something." Mara's eyes flickered to him, and then back to the view ahead. "So what's next?" Adrian turned to the screen, watching as the Concord station grew smaller behind them, and the vast, empty expanse of space stretched out in front of them. "What's next," he said, "is war." Back on Earth, command was still reeling from the transmission. The moment Holt's encrypted message had come through, it had scrambled every channel, every frequency. The data, the documents, the evidence, the testimonies was undeniable. But the truth, while damning, was just the beginning. The shock waves had yet to hit. Admiral Eleanor Kerrigan, the highest-ranking officer in the Earth fleet, sat alone in her command center, her eyes scanning the data as it was processed. The horrors Holt had exposed weren't new to her. She had suspected the Concord's peace was a farce for years. But the scope of it was worse than she had imagined. When the transmission had come through, Kerrigan had barely managed to keep her composure. There had been no celebration, no relief. Only the grim knowledge that everything they had known, everything they had fought for, had been built on a foundation of lies. The room was dark, save for the glow of the monitors. In the shadows, Kerrigan's fingers hovered over the keys, fighting the urge to reach for the comms console and issue a command to initiate a full-scale assault on the Concord. But she couldn't. Not yet. The galaxy was on the brink of a war the likes of which it had never seen before. And humanity's first step had been to reveal the truth. In the depths of the Galactic Concord's military command center, Admiral Zorak of the Serenity stood over a console, staring at the live feed of Holt's escape. He had known this day would come. The humans had always been an unpredictable variable, always probing the limits of the peace they had so graciously offered. Zorak's sharp, predatory eyes narrowed as he issued orders to his fleet. "Prepare the fleet for full mobilization. This will be their last warning." The Serenity had been the architects of the peace. They were the ones who had manipulated and orchestrated the entire Concord, ensuring that only their interests thrived. But now they faced an unpredictable enemy, one that had learned too much too fast, one that refused to stay silent. The Resolute cut through the void of space, its sleek hull shimmering in the starlight, as Mara Radley piloted the ship toward the outer rim of the system. Adrian Holt was slumped in his seat, his hands gripping the edge of the console, the pain from his wound growing sharper by the second. He'd already lost too much blood, But it didn't matter. The message was out. The first step had been taken. Now, the universe would have to reckon with the truth. Adrian, Mara said, her voice tight with both concern and fear, we're not safe yet. The Concorde will be coming after us. If they don't come for us, Earth won't be far behind, wondering why you exposed everything without their orders. Adrian didn't answer immediately. He was staring out at the stars, his thoughts swirling. The message had reached Earth, but it had sent shockwaves through the entire galaxy. The factions, the alliances, and the enemies of the Concorde now knew humanity wasn't afraid to act. But would they believe humanity was powerful enough to survive the war that was coming? Do you ever wonder if we bit off more than we can chew? Mara added quietly, glancing at him with a mixture of concern and disbelief. Adrian finally tore his gaze away from the stars, his voice low. We didn't bite off anything. We spoke the truth. And that's what they're afraid of. He had hoped that revealing the reality of the Concorde's lies would ignite some kind of resistance from within the ranks of the galaxy's lesser races. That maybe, just maybe, the truth would unite those who had suffered under the Concorde's lies. But Holt knew that it might also do the opposite. The Concorde had built its peace on violence and suppression. Its enemies, the ones the Concorde had left in ruin, would now see humanity as the only force capable of bringing real change. And in turn, they would strike back. The comms console blinked, a signal coming through, a message from Earth's command. Holt stiffened, swiping it open. Admiral Kerrigan's face appeared on the screen, her expression hard. She wasted no time. Ambassador Holt, she said, you've sparked a firestorm. The Concorde isn't just going to sit back and let this go. They're already mobilizing their fleets, and you've just made humanity a target. Earth is going to have to make a choice, whether to protect you or let you go. I've already made my choice, Adrian replied, his voice rough. I didn't expose this for Earth's glory. I did it because it was the right thing to do. The Concorde's entire foundation is a lie. We know, Kerrigan replied, a flicker of something dark crossing her face. But you need to prepare yourself. Earth is not prepared for an all-out war with the Concorde, and even less prepared for the fallout that's coming. Adrian's gaze hardened. Then we prepare ourselves. And we fight. The Concorde's lies end here. The screen blinked out, and Adrian leaned back, his mind already racing through the steps ahead. The Concorde's response was inevitable. If the Council had been able to suppress the truth for centuries, they wouldn't go down without a fight. They would crush Earth's attempt to expose them. And if that meant war, if that meant shedding the false peace they'd built, it didn't matter. Humanity had already crossed a line. Do you think they'll come for us directly? Mara asked, her fingers flying over the ship's controls. Adrian was silent for a moment, thinking. They'll come for us, he said, but not just us. The Concorde will make an example of Earth. They'll strike first, hard and fast, targeting Earth's colonies along the fringes of the system. They'll send a message. Anyone who dares challenge them will be crushed. Mara cursed under her breath. If they do that, they'll have a war on their hands. And not just with Earth, but with everyone who's been oppressed by them. Adrian nodded grimly. That's the hope. They flew deeper into the uncharted zone, the outer rim of human space, a place far removed from the reach of the Concorde's main fleets. But even here, in this remote corner of the galaxy, the ripples of the truth Holt had revealed were beginning to spread. Back on Earth, Admiral Kerrigan had already begun her preparations, sending out an urgent call to the human colonies scattered across the galaxy. Humanity would have to unite. The Concorde's retaliation was not just inevitable, but imminent. The darkened bridge of the Erebus, flagship of the Sailnari fleet, thrummed with activity. Admiral Zorak watched the holographic map of the galaxy as it glowed before him. Ships were already being deployed, fleets gathering in the shadows of the Concorde's various sectors. Zorak's orders were simple. Strike fast, strike hard, and crush any resistance before it could gather strength. The humans had revealed too much, and in doing so, they had given him no choice. Prepare the first fleet, Zorak commanded, his voice cold as the depths of space. We are not just defending peace. We are defending the future of the galaxy. We will show these upstart humans what happens when they expose the truth. A quiet, almost inaudible hum pulsed through the room as the fleet began to mobilize. Somewhere in the depths of the outer rim, hidden beneath the surface of a barren moon, a ragtag group of ships was already assembling. They were the ones who had been silenced, the lost, the forgotten, the oppressed by the Concorde's grand design. They had heard Holt's message, and they were ready to fight. In the dark, hollow depths of the moon's subterranean base, shadows moved like ghosts across the dimly lit corridors. There was no grandeur here, no opulent halls or polished floors like those on the Concorde station. But the quiet was its own kind of power. This was the last sanctuary of the oppressed, a haven for those whose cries had been ignored for far too long. Adrian Holt stood at the front of a long, narrow table, scanning the faces gathered before him. The room was filled with representatives from every corner of the galaxy. Rokan of the Qatari, his massive form a near-immovable mass, sitting across from the elegant but grim-faced Consul Mirren of the Veari. At the far end, Captain Celine Tran, leader of the human resistance on the outer colonies, leaned forward in her chair, her eyes burning with a mixture of hope and fury. "We have no time to waste," Holt said, his voice firm but hoarse from exhaustion. His wound still burned, but the adrenaline coursing through him kept the worst of it at bay. "The Concorde's fleet is mobilizing. They'll come for Earth first, and they'll take out every colony on the fringe just to make an example of us. We need to unite, and we need to do it fast." Mirren's bioluminescent eyes flashed, her voice calm but cutting. "And what do you expect us to do, human? You think the Concorde will bow down to the likes of us? We have no resources to fight a war of this scale." Holt didn't flinch. "You all have resources. You just haven't used them. The Sailnari and the Concorde have crushed your systems for too long, kept you under their heel. But the moment you started listening to the truth, when you started hearing Holt's message, you realized something. You're not alone anymore. Humanity isn't alone anymore. We have the power to strike back, but we need to do it together." Rokan, silent up until now, finally spoke. "I fought beside your people in the early wars. The Qatari remember human strength. The Concorde may believe their peace is invulnerable, but they've never faced a united front of the galaxy's most oppressed. If we join this fight, the Concorde's walls will crumble." There was a murmur of agreement around the table. The faces of the alien representatives, once grim, now held a spark of defiance, something long buried beneath years of forced compliance. Adrian nodded, a sense of purpose building inside him. "Exactly. It's not just about standing against the Concorde. It's about taking down everything they've built, everything they've controlled. Their hold over the galaxy isn't invincible, and Earth has just thrown the first punch." Captain Tran spoke next, her voice clear and measured. "We've been preparing for this day since the first colonies went silent. The humans on the outer rim have been gathering their forces. Our fleets are ready to move when Earth's command gives the signal. But you need to give us the intel, the proof we can use to rally our people." Holt glanced at her with a sharp, knowing look. "You have it already. The quantum transmitters sent everything, from the black sites to the dead worlds the Concorde wiped from history. It's all in the hands of Earth's command now. Admiral Kerrigan has the authority to mobilize." There was a brief, heavy silence as the weight of their situation settled in. Holt could feel the eyes on him, the hopes, the doubts, the fire that had been kindled but not yet ignited. The galaxy's most powerful force had been built on lies, and humanity had just revealed the truth. They had the power now, not just to expose the Concorde's deceit, but to tear it down entirely. "Then we begin," Mirren said at last, her voice calm but determined. "If the Concorde believes we will cower, we will show them that unity is our strength. You've given us the truth, Holt. Now we will give you our fleets." In the heart of the Concorde's flagship, the Erebus, Admiral Zorax cold, predatory eyes narrowed as he received the latest transmission from the fleet commanders. The humans' resistance had been swift, and they had managed to rally the lesser races to their cause faster than he had anticipated. The truth had spread, faster than any of them had expected. It was a force unto itself, and Zorak hated it. Their fleets are gathering, a sub-commander reported, his voice tense. The Qatari, the Ve'ari, even the humans on the outer rim. They're uniting. Zorak stood, the steel in his posture making the entire room quiet. This is the consequence of their defiance, he muttered, his voice low and lethal. We will erase this rebellion before it has a chance to grow. We will destroy the resistance and crush Earth's will to fight. Turning to his officers, Zorak gave the order. Activate the convergence protocol. No mercy. Prepare the entire fleet. The first fleet will strike immediately, and Earth will burn. Back in the moon base, Adrian Holt stood with his back to the map table, watching the holographic image of the galaxy spin in front of him. The once dominant Concord, the architects of the so-called peace, were about to unleash their full wrath. But something had changed. The galaxy was not as it had been. The truth had awakened something in the darkness. The oppressed, the forgotten, the broken, all had heard Holt's message. They had united. And for the first time in millennia, the galaxy would no longer bow to the Concord's lies. We're ready, Captain Tran said, her voice resolute. The fleets are in position. Let's show them what humanity and all its allies can do. Adrian nodded grimly. Let's make sure they never forget that peace is only a lie when you have the truth. As the forces of the Concord moved into position for their first strike on Earth, a quiet, powerful resistance was forming in the shadows. It was no longer just humanity against the galaxy. It was the galaxy against the lies of the Concord. The first battle would be fierce, but Adrian Holt knew this war had only just begun, and humanity, with its truth, was ready to fight. The silence before the storm was deafening. Adrian Holt stood on the bridge of the Resolute, his hand gripping the cold metal rail. Before him, a holographic display of the galaxy flickered, fleets moving into position, coordinates shifting, and the flashing lines of communication connecting the disparate factions that now rallied under the banner of truth. The forces they had united were small, almost laughable in comparison to the full might of the Concord's fleet. But they had one advantage the Concord had long forgotten. Unity. He turned to Mara Radley, who was still focused on the controls. The Resolute was nestled deep in the shadow of a nearby asteroid field, hiding from the Concord's long-range sensors. The first strike was imminent, but there was no turning back. Humanity had ignited the spark, and now they would see if it could burn down the galaxy's lies. Ready, Mara? Adrian asked, his voice low, strained. She didn't look at him. Her gaze locked on the screen as the final preparations were made, just waiting for the signal. Once the Ve'ari and Qatari fleets give the go, we're all in. The countdown had already begun. The first wave of resistance ships had made their way into the inner rings of Concord space, positioning themselves at key choke points near the rim colonies. Every corner of the galaxy was now bracing for what would happen next. Adrian's mind raced back to the words of Admiral Kerrigan, back on Earth. We need to show them we can stand against them. We need to make them fear us. And that fear, he knew, was coming. Across the galaxy, at the heart of the Concord's military command, Admiral Zorak's face twisted with fury as the first warning signals flared across his command screen. His massive fingers slammed into the console, magnifying the tactical map before him. What is this? He growled. Where are these ships coming from? How are they in position already? His officers scrambled, but it was too late. The resistance had already launched their first wave. We're under attack, one of his sub-commanders shouted, his voice tight with panic. The Qatari and Ve'ari are breaking ranks. They've turned against us. The human fleets have already engaged the outer colonies. The Erebus, Zorak's flagship, shuddered as a distant shockwave reverberated through space. The first of the resistance ships, a mixed fleet of human and Qatari warships, had made contact with Concord forces. The battle for the rim colonies had begun, and with it, the beginning of a much larger conflict. The first few moments were a blur of alarms and flashing lights. Concord ships, once so confident in their superiority, were now being overwhelmed. The Qatari surprise maneuvering, coupled with human tactical ingenuity, had caught them off guard. The Concorde's elite fleet had underestimated their enemies, and now they were paying the price. Zorak's eyes narrowed. This is only the beginning. They've opened the gates of war. We will crush them. With a growl, he turned to his tactical officer. Activate the convergence protocol. Prepare the orbital weapons. Back on Earth, Admiral Eleanor Kerrigan watched the data stream in, her face stone cold. The first wave of resistance was already spreading across Concorde-controlled space like wildfire, but the full force of the Concorde was still a long way from arriving. The real battle would begin soon, and she knew it wasn't just Earth's future on the line. The fate of every free race in the galaxy rested on the coming conflict. Are we ready, Admiral? Captain Tran's voice crackled over the comms, firm but filled with unspoken worry. We're ready, Kerrigan replied, her eyes locked on the holographic map. But we need to move fast. If the Concorde decides to escalate, they'll target Earth directly. We need to keep them focused on the rim colonies. Hold them there, buy time for our fleets to grow, and for humanity to unite. Her command center was a blur of movement as officers worked furiously to coordinate the forces scattered across the colonies. The war had begun, but Earth was still playing catch-up, still in the process of shifting from a fractured resistance to a unified force. Back in the depths of the galaxy, in the cold, desolate silence of a forgotten asteroid field, Holt's fleet waited, holding its breath as the first shots of the war rang out. The Resolute was alone here, surrounded by nothing but the hushed backdrop of space. Yet Adrian knew their role. They would be the ones to strike the killing blow when the time was right. When the Concorde's attention was fully consumed with the chaos of the galaxy-wide battle, Earth would reveal its final trump card. Mara's voice broke through his thoughts. They're engaging in full-scale combat now. The Vayari and Qatari fleets are making a real dent in the Concorde's outer defense lines. But the Concorde's orbital weapons are coming online. We need to act soon, or they'll launch their counterattack. Adrian straightened, his heart hammering in his chest. The galaxy was ablaze with the fires of war. The truth had started a chain reaction, and now there was no stopping it. The final gambit was in motion. Prepare the fleet, Holt said. Once we have their attention, we'll move in. Earth's fleet has their orders. But this is just the beginning. We'll strike hard, and we'll strike fast. They would need to keep the Concorde focused on the rim colonies, avoid direct conflict with their full fleets for as long as possible. But they knew the truth. Once Earth's fleets joined the fight, the final battle would come quickly, and the galaxy's lies would burn in the flames of retribution. Admiral Zorak's voice crackled through the comms as he issued the final order. Initiate the orbital bombardment. Wipe the resistance from existence. The Concorde's fleet began to move into position, their weapons primed and ready. The first wave of planetary bombardments was imminent. But the resistance had already prepared. Humanity had already turned the page. And now, the war for the galaxy's future had begun. The vast expanse of space was alive with the hum of conflict. In the dark abyss, the clash of fleets reverberated like the sound of thunder, and the distant bursts of energy lit up the dark sky like stars in a dying galaxy. Adrian Holt stood at the helm of the Resolute, staring out into the chaos. Mara Radley sat beside him, her eyes flicking between the control panels, coordinating the fleet's movements with practiced precision. The resistance had struck first, and now the galaxy was in flames. The Qatari, Vayari, and human fleets had coordinated their attack with a ferocity that surprised even them. The Concorde had underestimated the fury of the oppressed, and their forces were scattered across the rim colonies, fighting for every inch of ground. Ships burned, entire stations fell silent, and planets that had been silenced for centuries suddenly spoke again, their voices rising in defiance. But the Concorde wasn't finished. The first wave of their retaliation had already begun, orbital bombardments from their flagship, the Erebus, and its accompanying fleets. The Concorde's convergence protocol had been activated, and they were no longer pulling punches. If the resistance couldn't hold their ground, Earth would be next. We need to act now, Adrian said, his voice tight with urgency. If the Concorde unleashes their full orbital strike, there won't be anything left. We need to divert their attention, draw them away from the outer rim, and focus them on us. Mara's eyes snapped to him, her fingers flying over the controls. How do you suggest we do that? They've got the Erebus and their full fleet in orbit. We can't match their firepower head-on. Adrian's gaze was steely, determined. We don't have to match them. We just need to make sure they focus on us long enough for the rest of the fleet to regroup. Earth's command will send reinforcements soon, but only if we keep them distracted. The plan was risky, perhaps too risky, but Holt knew there was no other choice. The galaxy had already been thrown into chaos, and Earth's future hung in the balance. The truth was out now. The question was whether humanity would survive long enough to see the fruits of their rebellion. On the Erebus, Admiral Zorak watched the tactical screen with growing frustration. The resistance had taken a heavy toll on his fleets, and though they were retaliating, it was far from the easy victory he had envisioned. The Resolute, the human flagship, was a thorn in their side. It had appeared out of nowhere, flitting in and out of Concorde space with ease, striking where they least expected it. He clenched his fists. I want that ship, Resolute, destroyed. Now. A young officer hesitated. Admiral, we've already mobilized the orbital weapons. The resistance forces are scattered, but the Resolute keeps slipping through the cracks. It's pulling away just when we have them in range. Zorak narrowed his eyes. They're playing a dangerous game, but I will not allow them to mock us any longer. Send everything, Zorak ordered, his voice cold and filled with deadly resolve. I want their fleet reduced to dust. Back in the heart of the resistance, Adrian's plan was already set in motion. His fleet, small but growing, was positioned in the shadows of a nearby asteroid field, a strategically placed refuge where they could remain hidden from a full eye of the Erebus. The moment the Concorde launched their full strike, the resistance would have to move swiftly. But Adrian had one more card to play. We've been holding back on our final weapon, Mara said, tapping a few commands into her console. The prototype's ready, but we still don't know if it will work against the Concorde's orbital defense systems. Adrian looked at her, his expression unwavering. We don't have a choice. It's now or never. The weapon was humanity's final gambit, a quantum disruptor, designed to interfere with the Concorde's most advanced technology, their defensive grids and orbital bombardment systems. If it worked, it could disable their ability to strike back with their deadly precision. But if it didn't, if the technology failed, Adrian knew it would leave them wide open for a counterattack. We can do this, Mara said, her voice full of resolve. She flicked a switch, sending the signal now. At the Erebus, Zorak's cold eyes narrowed as his officers reported on the growing threat. The Resolute is slipping again. They've activated something. There's a spike in quantum energy readings coming from their fleet. Zorak gritted his teeth. Don't let them get away with this. But it was too late. Suddenly, a blinding pulse of energy shot across the battlefield, a wave of distortion so powerful that even the Concorde flagship Erebus felt its tremors. The orbital bombardment systems that had been poised to annihilate the resistance fleets faltered, their power grids short-circuiting as the disruptor's pulse rippled through their systems. Across the battlefield, the Concorde fleet stuttered, their once imposing weapons faltering. Ships once poised for destruction now swerved uncontrollably as their targeting systems scrambled, unable to lock onto their enemies. In that instant, Adrian Holt felt the weight of the universe shift. The power was no longer in the hands of the Concorde. It was in theirs. Now, he shouted. Mara slammed her hand on the controls, and the fleet surged forward. The Resolute and its allies darted through the chaos, striking the weak points of the Concorde's disoriented ships. Their weapons, fueled by the element of surprise and the crippling disruption, tore through the Concorde fleet with precision. The odds were still stacked against them, but for the first time, the resistance held the upper hand. Admiral Zorak's fury was palpable. His flagship, the Erebus, had taken a direct hit, and its systems were failing. The enemy was breaking through. But what infuriated him most was the feeling that this wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a battle for the very narrative that the Concorde had built for centuries. He knew what would happen if they lost this war. The truth would unravel. The fragile peace the Concorde had forged would crumble, and the galaxy would be plunged into an era of chaos. Zorak's face twisted into a snarl. Prepare the final protocol. If we fall, we take everything with us. Adrian Holt could feel the weight of the moment. The quantum disruptor had turned the tide, but the Concorde was not finished yet. Their desperation would make them more dangerous than ever. The final gambit had been played. Now, the galaxy would either burn or be reborn. The galaxy trembled. The quantum disruptor's pulse had thrown the Concorde fleet into disarray, but the war was far from over. Adrian Holt stood on the command bridge of the Resolute, his eyes locked onto the chaotic battlefield unfolding in front of him. The once pristine Concorde forces were no longer the towering giants they had been. Their advanced weapons faltered, their fleet disjointed, but they still had the strength to retaliate. Zorak, the embittered admiral of the Erebus, was no fool. He was already scrambling for a counterattack, his fury igniting a dangerous desperation. "Admiral Holt," Mara Radley said, her voice tight with urgency. "The Concorde flagship has initiated something. A new protocol. They're using a self-destruct sequence. They're willing to sacrifice everything to wipe us out." Adrian's stomach tightened. Zorak had thrown everything into one final strike, a last-ditch effort to take down the resistance. "How long do we have?" "Less than an hour," Mara replied. "They're pulling back their remaining fleet into formation around the Erebus and activating an internal countdown. If we don't disable their core systems now, they'll take out everything within 100 light years." The countdown had already begun. The full fury of the Erebus's remaining forces was now trained on the resistance. Ships in the Concorde fleet were aligning, forming a defensive perimeter around the flagship. Adrian's pulse quickened. This was their last chance. One final push, one final chance to end the war before the Concorde made the ultimate sacrifice. He glanced at the tactical display. "We need to hit them fast and hard. The Erebus is their heart. If we destroy it, the fleet will collapse. But we can't penetrate their defenses in time. Not without a direct assault," Mara warned, her fingers hovering above the controls. "We need a diversion, something to break their lock." Adrian turned, meeting her gaze. "Get the Qatari and Ve'ari fleets to push forward. Create chaos. We'll move in during the confusion." Mara nodded, already transmitting orders to the other resistance leaders. The Qatari ships, massive and imposing, moved like shadows across the battlefield, their weaponry now unleashed with an unprecedented fury. The Ve'ari, agile and deadly, flanked the Concorde ships, darting between their lines with surgical precision. For a moment, it seemed as if the Concorde might falter. Admiral Zorak stood at the center of his command bridge, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of his seat. The resistance had struck with everything they had, and their tactical genius had thrown his forces into turmoil. His heart pounded in his chest, a sickening sense of urgency eating at him. The self-destruct sequence was ticking away, but Zorak wasn't ready to go down without taking the resistance with him. "Activate the graviton charge," Zorak growled. "I will burn them all if I must." The graviton charge was the ultimate weapon of the Concorde, a device that could manipulate gravity itself, turning entire fleets into crushing singularities, obliterating everything in its path. But Zorak knew it was a double-edged sword. Once activated, it would consume everything in range, friend and foe alike. "We'll take them all with us," Zorak muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The threat of annihilation wasn't just a tactical move. It was the Concorde's last statement, a declaration that the peace they had forged would not die quietly. Back aboard the Resolute, the final assault was taking shape. The resistance fleet had fought their way through the chaos, pushing closer to the Erebus. Adrian could see it on his tactical display, the shimmering form of the flagship, now surrounded by debris and shattered ships. The Resolute and its allies were closing in, but they were running out of time. "We can't wait much longer," Mara said. "The graviton charge is almost ready." Adrian's eyes scanned the battlefield, calculating. He had one chance, one shot at disabling the Erebus before Zorak triggered the graviton device. The Resolute was too far from the flagship to strike directly with conventional weapons. "Prepare the translocator," Adrian ordered. The device was a gamble, humanity's prototype. If it worked, they could teleport a strike team directly to the heart of the Erebus, bypassing its defenses entirely. If it failed, they would lose everything. Mara's fingers flew across her console. Initializing the translocator now. Targeting coordinates set. A flash of light filled the bridge as the device powered up. The pressure in the air thickened as the translocator hummed, its quantum mechanics warping space around it. "We're ready," Mara said, her voice low with anticipation. Adrian's hand hovered over the command button. "Let's make sure this works." On the Erebus, Zorak stood at the center of his control room, his fingers trembling as the countdown for the graviton charge inched closer. He could feel the weight of the moment, the crushing finality of his plan. The galaxy would bow to the Concorde's might or be annihilated in the process. "Fire the graviton charge," he roared. But the final blow never came. A flash of brilliant white light erupted from the Resolute. A strike team of elite soldiers, armed with the latest human technology, materialized on the Erebus's bridge. Zorak's officers scrambled in panic as the team tore through the defenses, their weapons precise, their movements deadly. "You fool," Zorak hissed, his voice shaking with rage. "Do you think this will stop us?" But the damage had already begun. The translocator had dropped them into the heart of the Erebus, and now Adrian's team was working fast. Explosives set. Power cores destabilizing. The flagship's command center was falling apart. Zorak's eyes widened as the countdown continued, but there was nothing he could do. The resistance had breached the Erebus. "Not today," Adrian's voice crackled through the comms. "This war ends now." On the Resolute, Mara watched the explosion light up the sky, the destruction of the Erebus sending a shockwave through the battlefield. The Concorde fleet, now leaderless and disoriented, began to crumble. One by one, their ships fell. But Adrian knew this was just the beginning. The truth had won today, but the war was far from over. The galaxy had changed forever, and humanity had finally taken its place as the truth-bearers of the universe. The Erebus was no more. Its remnants drifted in space like broken shards of a shattered mirror. The once imposing flagship of the Concorde, the symbol of their power and dominance, had been obliterated. Adrian Holt stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching the aftermath unfold on the tactical display. The Concorde fleet was in disarray. Without their flagship, without their command structure, their once unbeatable forces had turned into little more than scattered debris. But even in victory, Adrian couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gnawed at him. The war wasn't over. The destruction of the Erebus was a blow, yes, but the Concorde wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. "We've done it," Mara Radley said, her voice tentative, as if unsure whether to celebrate or brace for what was coming next. "We've broken them. Their fleet is in chaos. The remaining ships are retreating. They'll need time to regroup." Adrian nodded, but his thoughts were far away. Earth had won a major battle today, but the truth they had uncovered, the truth of the Concorde's manipulation, was only the beginning. What would happen now? How could they rebuild the galaxy, piece by piece, when the damage was so widespread? "Admiral Holt," Mara said, her voice pulling him back into the moment. "There's a communication coming through from Earth. They've received our report. They want to talk about the next steps." Adrian sighed, rubbing his eyes. "Put it through." Back on Earth, Admiral Eleanor Kerrigan stood at the helm of the command center, the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. The war was shifting in their favor. The news of the Erebus's destruction had sparked cheers across the colonies, but Kerrigan knew better than to get too comfortable. The Concorde was a juggernaut. They would not be easily defeated. The holographic display flickered to life, showing Adrian Holt's face. He was tired, as she expected. The battle had taken a heavy toll on everyone. "Admiral Holt," Kerrigan said, her voice steady but weary. "I take it we've made a significant dent in their forces?" "More than a dent," Adrian replied. The Erebus is gone, and the Concorde fleet is in disarray. But we're not finished yet. They'll be regrouping soon, and they'll come at us harder. We need to keep the pressure on them. Now is the time to move. Kerrigan's eyes narrowed. She had expected this. We've been preparing for this moment. Earth's fleet is ready to deploy for the final push. But I'll be honest, Holt, we need more than just our military might. The galaxy is in pieces. The truth is out now, but we still have to convince the rest of the galaxy to stand with us. Adrian's expression hardened. We've already started that process. The Qatari and Ve'ari fleets are with us now. The truth is spreading. But it won't be enough unless we can take the fight to the heart of the Concorde. We need to bring down their entire government. We need to break their control over the galaxy once and for all. Kerrigan nodded. And what's the plan? We've already started infiltrating their communication networks. The next step is to broadcast the truth to every corner of the galaxy. If we can expose the full extent of their lies to the people, we can trigger a rebellion from within. The Concorde might crumble without ever firing another shot. Kerrigan was silent for a long moment, her eyes scanning the data flowing in from across the galaxy. The situation was volatile, but Adrian was right. The tide was turning. Very well, Kerrigan said finally. I'll give the orders to move forward with the final offensive. We'll need to coordinate with the remaining resistance forces. And we'll need the public's support. Adrian's lips curled into a grim smile. Leave that to us. We'll make sure the galaxy hears us loud and clear. The resistance began its final push. Across the galaxy, people who had lived under the false peace of the Concorde rose up in rebellion. The Qatari, Ve'ari, and countless other races, once bound by fear, now saw an opportunity for true freedom. They took to the stars, their fleets joining humanity in a united front against the crumbling Concorde. But even in victory, Adrian knew the hardest part was yet to come. With the Erebus gone, the remaining Concorde forces had retreated to their central worlds, deep in the heart of Concorde space. There, the true leaders of the Concorde awaited, ready to do whatever it took to hold onto their grip on power. Adrian's fleet was en route, but he knew that the next battle would not be won by ships and weapons alone. The war had become ideological. The galaxy had to choose. Would they continue to follow the lies of the Concorde, or would they embrace the truth humanity had uncovered? Are we ready for this? Mara asked, standing beside Adrian on the bridge. We've shattered their military strength, but the heart of the Concorde is still intact. The leaders, those in charge of everything, they won't surrender easily. Adrian turned to her, his face a mask of determination. They won't have a choice. The truth is stronger than any weapon they have. But it's up to us to make sure it spreads. Earth will lead the charge, but we need the galaxy's people to finish it. We need them to believe in something better. Mara nodded, though doubt still lingered in her eyes. The galaxy had been forged in lies. Could it really be rebuilt on truth? The battle lines were drawn. The resistance had made its stand, but the real war was just beginning. Humanity had taken the first steps towards shaping the future, but it was uncertain whether the galaxy would follow or burn in the fires of revolution. As the fleet surged forward, heading deep into the heart of Concorde space, Adrian Holt steeled himself for what was to come. The final confrontation was at hand, and there would be no turning back. On Earth, the message began to spread, a signal broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. A single, simple message that could change everything. The truth. The Resolute's words echoed across every ship, every station, every colony. The Concorde's peace was a lie. Humanity holds the truth, and it is time for the galaxy to choose its future. In the distance, the heart of Concorde space loomed large, dark, and foreboding. The final battle was approaching, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. The stars ahead were no longer just distant lights. They were a countdown. Adrian Holt could feel the weight of the universe pressing down on him as the Resolute and its fleet surged forward toward the heart of Concorde space. The final battle was upon them. The space between them and the Concorde central worlds felt like an eternity, but in reality, It was only a matter of hours. As the fleet approached, the massive fortress worlds of the Concord loomed in the distance. These were no ordinary planets. Each one was fortified beyond anything the Resistance had ever faced. The heart of the Concord's power was here. This was where the central government, the Council of the Elders, ruled with an iron fist, where they had orchestrated the lies that had kept the galaxy under their control for centuries. Their defenses are formidable, Mara Radley said, her voice sharp with tension. We've come this far, but getting through their blockade will be a different story. Adrian studied the readings, his mind working in overdrive. The Concord's forces were massed here, but they were scattered, too. The loss of the Erebus had shaken them to their core, and their central command was in disarray. Still, this was no easy fight. The final confrontation wouldn't be won in space alone. It would be won in the hearts of the people. The truth had to be broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. If we can push through their defenses, we can reach the core worlds, Adrian said, his voice firm. Once we're inside their inner systems, we take the fight to their leaders. We expose them to the galaxy once and for all. Mara gave him a look of both concern and determination. And if we don't make it through? If we don't make it through, the galaxy will still hear us. The truth will still spread. Adrian's eyes darkened. But I'm not planning on failing. Back on Earth, Admiral Eleanor Kerrigan stood in the heart of the command center, her eyes scanning the flow of data coming in from all across the galaxy. The Resistance had already begun their final offensive, pushing deeper into the heart of Concord space. The broadcasts had begun, each one a call to arms. People everywhere were hearing the truth for the first time. The lies of the Concord were unraveling, and with each passing moment, their control slipped further away. But Kerrigan knew that this wouldn't be over until the leaders of the Concord were brought to justice. She looked out the window at the planet below, the world that had survived countless years of oppression, now standing at the precipice of freedom. "Sir," a voice called from behind. She turned to see her second-in-command, Captain Gabriel Rios, entering the room. "Reports are coming in from the front lines. The fleet is engaging the Concord forces." "Good," Kerrigan said, her face unreadable. "It's all or nothing now." In the heart of Concord space, the Resistance fleet began to make its move. The massive fortress worlds loomed large, their vast defenses intimidating. But the Resistance had one advantage. Their fleet was unified, every ship and every commander driven by the same goal, to expose the truth and end the Concord's reign once and for all. Adrian Holt stood at the front of the Resolute, his eyes focused on the enormous wall of Concord ships ahead. Their fleets were dug in, their weapons ready to strike. The battle was upon them. But Adrian knew this was the moment that would decide everything. "All ships engage," he ordered, his voice calm despite the rising tension. "Push them back. We're going for the heart of their command." The Resistance fleet surged forward, weapons firing in unison as they collided with the Concord blockade. The vast numbers of Concord ships, massive, efficient, and deadly, bore down on them like a tidal wave. But the Resistance had something the Concord never expected, a unity born of truth and the will to free the galaxy. As the battle raged around him, Adrian's thoughts were on the mission. They couldn't simply win this battle. They had to reach the heart of the Concord. They had to make sure the galaxy could see, once and for all, the truth that had been hidden for so long. "Mara," Adrian said, his voice urgent, "is the signal ready?" "It's ready," she replied, her fingers flying over the controls. "As soon as we breach their command center, we'll transmit it. Every corner of the galaxy will hear what the Concord has done. Every colony, every fleet, every citizen will know the truth." A massive explosion shook the Resolute, sending tremors through the ship. Adrian's eyes darted to the tactical display. Several Concord ships had broken through their defenses. The enemy was striking back with all their might. "Reinforcements are coming in from Earth," Mara reported. "The final push is starting. We just need to hold our ground." Adrian's grip tightened on the command chair. The Resistance fleet was holding, but the battle was far from over. He knew that the next phase of the war was not going to be won by firepower alone. The galaxy's leaders, those who had been complicit in the lies, had to be exposed. They had to know they could no longer hide behind their lies. Back in the heart of the Concord government, the Council of Elders watched the battle unfold through their private communication feeds. The destruction of the Erebus had shaken them, but they were determined to hold on. The truth, however, was a force they had underestimated. It was spreading faster than they had anticipated. "I want all fleets to converge on the Resolute," one of the council members said, his voice cold and calculating. "We will crush them here, and then we will ensure that no one dares to challenge our control again." But as he spoke, the holographic display flickered. Something was wrong. "Sir," an aide interrupted, her voice trembling. "The signal, it's already being transmitted. The resistance has breached our communications networks. The truth, it's everywhere." The council member's face turned pale. "What do you mean, everywhere?" The aide's fingers flew across the console. "Every system, every colony, everyone is hearing the broadcast. The truth about the Concord's lies, the manipulation, the suppression, it's spreading like wildfire." For the first time, the council member hesitated, his confidence faltering. The Concord's grip on the galaxy was slipping. "We've lost control," the aide whispered. Adrian watched from the bridge of the Resolute as the Concord forces faltered. The resistance was pushing through their defenses, and the truth was now being heard by every corner of the galaxy. The battle was still raging, but victory was no longer just a dream. It was within their grasp. But the war was not over. The final confrontation was nearing. "The council won't go down without a fight," Mara said, her voice tense. "They'll do everything they can to hold on to power." Adrian nodded. "Then we'll make sure the galaxy knows the truth before they have a chance to regroup." The final battle for the heart of the Concord was not yet won, but they were closer than they'd ever been. The galaxy was awakening, and with every moment, the lies of the past were being torn down. And at the heart of it all, Adrian Holt knew that humanity had made its mark on history. The truth was spreading, but the final fight was yet to come. The final battle had reached its climax. Adrian Holt stood at the bridge of the Resolute, watching as the Concord's vast defensive formations began to crumble. Their fleets, once a symbol of invincibility, were now a scattered shadow of their former selves. The truth had done what weapons could not. The broadcast, the signal that had started from Earth, had spread to every corner of the galaxy. Systems that had lived in the shadow of the Concord's lies were now awake, enraged, and ready for change. But the final victory was still out of reach. Adrian's eyes were fixed on the central world of the Concord, Naxxor, the capital, the heart of their empire, where the Council of Elders resided in their immense citadel. It was here that the true power of the Concord lay, and it was here that the resistance needed to strike, to bring an end to the false peace and expose the ruling class for what they were. "Admiral Holt," Mara Radley's voice crackled over the comms. "We've breached their outer defenses. The fleet is now in position to strike Naxxor. We're ready for the final assault." Adrian's mind raced. There was no turning back now. "I want every ship to move into attack formation," he ordered, his voice unwavering. "We take Naxxor. We take them down." The fleet began to move, a tidal wave of ships, a cacophony of energy weapons and engines that rippled through space toward their target. But even as they approached, Adrian knew the hardest part was ahead. The Council of Elders had prepared for this moment. They were not about to relinquish their control without a fight. On Naxxor, the Council of Elders watched from their high command as the resistance approached. The holographic images of their leaders were tense, their eyes dark with fear and fury. "It's over," one of the elders said, her voice quiet, almost resigned. She had known this day would come, but now that it had, she found herself unprepared for the magnitude of what was happening. "Not yet," another elder replied, his eyes burning with determination. "We still have the means to win. We control the communications grid, the economy, the fleet. We'll send the signal out again. The galaxy will rally to our side. They always have." "But the truth is already out there," the first elder countered. "They've heard it. They know what we've done. They know we've been lying to them all this time. Then we'll make them forget, the elder spat. We'll use the last of our resources to strike at their core. We'll destroy Earth and the resistance once and for all. The room was silent as the rest of the council members absorbed the gravity of the statement. They had no choice but to go down fighting. On the Resolute, Adrian prepared for the final phase of their assault. The resistance had broken through most of the outer defenses around Naxxor, and the fleet had engaged in a fierce battle with the remaining Concord forces. But now, Adrian knew they had to make it to the heart of the city, the Council's citadel. "Mara, get the strike team ready," he said, his voice steady, though the pressure weighed heavily on him. "We're going in." "I'm already on it," Mara replied. "They're ready to go. But we've got one problem. They've activated the planetary defense system. They'll do everything they can to prevent us from getting to the Council." "I know," Adrian said, "but we can't wait. The longer we stay out here, the more time they have to regroup. We go in now, hit them hard, and expose them for good." The assault on Naxxor's surface was swift. The resistance forces made their way through the war-torn streets, fighting their way past Concord loyalists and automated defense systems. The city's towering structures loomed overhead, casting long shadows over the shattered landscape. This was the heart of the Empire, and it was about to fall. As they reached the Council's citadel, Adrian and his strike team fought their way through the corridors, their mission clear: find the Council of Elders, expose their lies to the galaxy, and end their reign once and for all. The walls were lined with elite Concord guards, but the resistance was undeterred. Every shot fired, every step taken, was one closer to ending the war. Adrian could feel the truth rising within him, a burning force that had kept him moving this far. They had taken the galaxy by storm, and now they were here to finish what they had started. At the center of the citadel, the Council of Elders watched helplessly as their city fell. The resistance had reached the heart of their stronghold, and there was nowhere left to run. "You are too late," the head of the council said, his voice laced with defiance. "Even if you kill us, the damage has already been done. The galaxy will return to chaos. You cannot stop what has already begun." Adrian stood in the doorway, his eyes cold. "You think the galaxy will return to chaos? No, it will rebuild. The truth is stronger than any control you had. And when the galaxy sees what you've done, there will be no one left to support you." The council's arrogance crumbled in an instant. One by one, they fell silent, realizing that their empire had indeed fallen. The lies they had told for centuries were now exposed, and there was no escaping the truth. Adrian's voice rang out, clear and steady. "The galaxy will no longer live in the shadows of your lies. The resistance is over. The Concord is over. This is the dawn of a new era." A moment of silence passed, broken only by the hum of the power systems in the citadel. And then, without warning, the final blow came. Mara's team breached the central communications hub, sending a broadcast across the galaxy. The truth was being heard, louder than ever. The members of the council knew they had lost. There was nothing left to do. They had spent their lives in the pursuit of power, but now the universe had seen their lies, and it would never forget. Across the galaxy, systems that had once been silent were now in motion. People were speaking up. The governments of the galaxy, once controlled by the Concord, were starting to crack, their false order crumbling under the weight of the truth. Rebellions were sparked, alliances formed, and in the hearts of the people, a new hope began to rise. On Earth, Admiral Eleanor Kerrigan stood with her crew, watching as the broadcast reached every corner of the galaxy. The resistance had succeeded. The truth had won. "We did it," Mara said quietly, standing next to Adrian. Adrian looked out at the vast expanse of space, a sense of quiet pride filling him. The galaxy was changing, and humanity had led the charge. The Concord was gone, and a new era was beginning. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We've shown the galaxy the truth. Now we rebuild." As the stars twinkled before them, Adrian Holt knew that the future of the galaxy was in their hands. The peace they had fought for would not be one of lies, but one forged in the light of truth. The galaxy had awoken, and humanity had let it into a new dawn.